My name is John Harris. I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2012.
I'm Daniel Lim. I graduated from Duke University in 2016. So I am a 2016 grad. I guess to fully contextualize this, you should kind of take a few steps back. 2011, after graduating high school, I was in law school at Sydney University, during which I was committed to becoming a lawyer in Australia. At that time, I got a call from UNSW, which was kind of the conduit to the Robertson program, that asked me to apply for this program that I thought would have been, a shot in heaven. There's no way this would happen. And lo and behold, I got lucky enough to get the call back and ended up instead in Durham in 2012, starting it off. Long story short, by the time it was 2015, I interned at a global investment bank called Goldman Sachs. I got a full-time offer there, and I started there in 2016 after I graduated on the bond desk. So I've been in finance my whole career.
So it's funny that you say that you started out in Australia on a career path toward law, because that is what I do. So I'm a lawyer. I graduated from UNC in 2012 and stayed in Chapel Hill for law school for the next 3 years and graduated from law school in 2015. I moved to my current job where I'm an assistant United States attorney. I'm a federal prosecutor.
Wow.
With the U.S. Attorney's Office with the U.S. Department of Justice. So our office covers basically the eastern third of North Carolina.
Okay.
And our office prosecutes crimes and pursues civil remedies for people who've defrauded the government. And then there's a variety of other things that come along with that. So that's what I do now. I've been doing that for going on about 3 years.
All right.
I did work in New Orleans for my community summer. So it dated me a little bit because this was 2009. This was less than 4 years after Hurricane Katrina had come through New Orleans. So I was working for a disaster relief organization, and we were rebuilding houses down in the St. Bernard Parish, which is, you've got New Orleans proper, then just to the east, you've got the lower Ninth Ward, and then to the east of that, you have St. Bernard's Parish, which was much like the lower Ninth, wiped out. So that was my time there, living with multiple scholars. I think probably 8 or 9 of us lived in a duplex house, all kind of getting up in the morning and going and doing different things.
Great.
Now, what about you? You were in New Orleans as well?
I was also in New Orleans.
Okay, what were you doing?
I was, to your earlier point, doing exactly what you didn't do, which was the legal side of things. I was working for the New Orleans Public Defender's Office. Okay. I wore a variety of hats there as, a summer intern, summer associate sort of person, but one of my major roles was to be a medical advocate for the inmates. So it would be a role where I would kind of liaise with the public defenders who, as I'm sure you're aware, are overworked and significantly underpaid for the work they do. They have hundreds and hundreds of clients who they are unable to see because of really just resource constraints. So a lot of my role was to make sure those inmates, the clients that we had who were covered by public defenders in prison, had the medical attention that they needed. And so as a young person, I would go in there to first appearances in court, get an idea of what the medical needs of all these people on intake were. And if a couple of them had higher needs, then I would make sure that their attorney on the case knew that. I would liaise with the jailer to make sure that the jail doctor kind of had all of their highlights from a who do I need to take care of standpoint. So that was largely my role in New Orleans.
It sounds like you were going to spend, a good bit of time in and around the courts and sort of in and around the prisons too, which is eye-opening, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and that's actually a great point you touched upon, John, because I think for community summers, the biggest thing, and when I kind of take a step back and look back in hindsight, the biggest thing there was just really shock factor to, any young person. We're like 18, 19-year-olds living as adults, 4 or 5 of us in a house in New Orleans, still growing up, not really knowing what the world is. And then a bunch of us, like I'm going to courts, interviewing inmates, a few of us are building houses, some people are interning at the zoo. Like there's all this stuff that's going on that you never really expect to find yourself in. And it really just creates the opportunity to tackle things that you would never thought you would ever have to make decisions upon. And that kind of like leads a good like trajectory throughout my Robertson experience personally, because it allowed me to see things I would never see, 1, and 2, have kind of practice in decision making in those situations that you would never really have encountered, anyway. Because as you know, life is about trade-offs. There's a lot of decision-making processes, and when you're exposed to those serious decisions early on, I think it helps from a developmental standpoint for any young person, and particularly anyone hoping to be a leader in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one thing you touched on is you also get to see the human side of these issues that are sort of talked about and oftentimes in abstract terms in our world. I know that was certainly the case for me in my community summer. You talk about, okay, disaster relief. You hear about Hurricane Katrina on the news, but then you're going in there and you're meeting the person whose house used to be there and they have 2 kids and a dog, right, and now it's just a concrete slab. What are we going to do about it? And I'm sure for you, similar when you're actually coming face to face with the criminal justice system, and I'm sure that you're going to carry that experience with you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest takeaways I had of that summer, just being a kid from Australia and not really understanding America generally, but and in particular this, total little microcosm of like New Orleans as well, was a totally different culture versus what I had experienced at Duke and UNC.
I think for me, one of the experiences that I certainly can point to that was in some ways defining, I come back to it a lot, and not necessarily in the way you would think, was in my second summer. So, we talked about the community summer, second summer, back in my day. I'll say that over and over again, but back in my day, we call it the exploration summer. And you had a lot of freedom to kind of pick something. I think there was definitely encouragement from the program to do something international.
Yep.
Consistent with one of the themes you're talking about, trying to get outside your comfort zone. And so, for me, I crafted my own experience, and it was rooted in kind of intersections of things I was thinking about, reading about, certainly elements of my personal faith. And ultimately, I ended up being able to travel with the goal to have a wilderness experience and consider how wilderness experiences, and particularly looking at sort of the travel itinerary, track some significant figures in the Bible, sort of in the Christian faith and in the Jewish tradition as well, and what those wilderness experiences, how they led to leadership development.
Interesting.
And I think that's a theme that cuts across religions and cultures. The classic heroes descend to the underworld and they come back, etc. So, I put together this itinerary and I traveled to Egypt and to Israel for 7 weeks, just backpacking essentially through there. I was taking Arabic at the time at Carolina. After this trip, I decided to quit Arabic because I realized I was wasting my time because I couldn't speak hardly at all. But anyway, so we went to Egypt, went to Cairo, a little bit of culture shock, but then we got out into the wilderness in the Sinai Peninsula. Not a safe place to go at the moment, but back in 2010 when this was happening, it was at least manageable. And we went out and did 15 days backpacking with some Bedouin guides. And so we'd get up every morning and we would sort of go out with the guide. There we would have our stuff with a camel who would transport it to a different location. We'd go hike the mountains. And me and my friend, through this process, we were reflecting on these experiences and how it relates to leadership development. But for me personally, the big takeaway was not long after we got to the Sinai, whether it was something I ate, something I drank, I don't know, but I got really sick. And so, we were out there, and I remember, I think it was our first full night, kind of like out really in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And I look up, and I cannot describe how many stars you could see. And, I had done some hiking out in Utah and in the North Carolina mountains, nothing compared. The clear sky, you could see the Milky Way as plain as day running right across the top of it. And I looked up and I saw those stars, and I was like, here I am across the world, right? Literally emptying myself in the desert, and I felt so tiny. And in that moment, it was such a freeing experience, I think, because, for probably every Robertson that comes in, you come in and you're working towards something and you're driven and you're achieving, you're trying to figure out what's my place in the world. But I guarantee you, if you could ask every single Robertson scholar coming in what their place in the world, they would say it's something big, right? It's something up here. And for me, that reminder of this is actually me.
Yeah.
Like whatever I do in my life, that's great, but I'm this tiny little speck in the middle of the desert right now. Sort of being able to throw the weight of the world off your shoulders, and then be able to, attack your destiny, so to speak.
Right.
That was a really, really meaningful experience for me.
Wow.
So tell me about your exploration summer, and it doesn't have to be, getting sick in the desert. I hope that you weren't. So what did you do for your second summer?
So we also called it exploration summer in my day as well, and it was very free-flowing, kind of whatever you wanted to do. The theme that stuck with me after New Orleans was the socioeconomic side of things, and I didn't mention this in my background before, but I'm from Australia, but I was originally born in Myanmar. So, Southeast Asia, kind of third world country, very right now going through military issues, and the military's taken over again. They're on the brink of civil war. But given that was my hometown before Australia, that's always been at the back of my mind to do something impactful or something that's helpful for that nation over there. And after I came out of New Orleans and seeing the systemic issues, the socioeconomic issues that a lot of those families and people go through, I tried to think about how I could apply some of whatever it is that I was going to be a part of in the future to my home country that also required all of this. And my whole family was there as well, so there was a personal connection for me to try and do something positive there.
Sure.
And that led me to thinking about, okay, Southeast Asia. I know about it because I lived there, and that as a child, but I never really got to engage with it intellectually or from an employment standpoint at a higher level, how buildings are built, how infrastructure works, what the government is thinking. All that kind of stuff drove me to think about, okay, exploration summer, I'm gonna do something in Southeast Asia. Thankfully, we had, the Robertson connection had someone out there called Peter Ryder, who was the CEO of this company called Indochina Capital. That was taking Robertsons in to give them an experience of what it's like to work for a private equity firm or investment advisor in Vietnam. So I worked for them for 10 weeks in Southeast Asia, really trying to flex that. How do I make an impact on this region, as well as understanding the world of economics and like finance from that perspective at least.
Part of what the Robertson does is give you those both formal time in terms of a symposium. That they bring in alums. I know we've had dinners and things where talk about these issues about ethics. They give you these experiences out in the community where you're kind of forced to not just get so caught up in the business of life, but start to think about, I can do X, Y, or Z. I can even be, 1, 2, or 3. But how am I going to bring the art? Am I going to do life and sort of bring these things together, such that I'm going to act consistent with my own system of values? And how am I going to define those values? And how am I going to define those values as life changes over time? And I think that the Robertson has made strides, frankly, from what I've seen as an alum, even maybe more strides than when I was a student, to make sure that it's that type of formal thinking and the space for that, so that when you're by the time you graduated, you're not getting thrown sort of feet first in the deep water. You kind of have the boat constructed, and you're still going to be constructing it kind of as you go and tweaking it, but you're going to be able to live your life as an ethical person. But you're also going to have those tools, not just to live your own life as an ethical person with your head down according to your own framework. You're going to be able to lead others. You're going to be able to set organizational values. You're going to be able to communicate those values to others. You're going to be able to bring, when they deviate, bring them back. So those are some of the relationships between leadership and ethics that I think are important, but also think that the Robertson is right to focus on, and I think has been doing a good job giving current scholars, and alums the opportunity to have some space to think about those things.
Right. Well said. Very well said. I think for me, it's kind of, I'm going to take a leaf out of your book, John, and refer to something that you mentioned earlier, which was, being in a class of people who are not afraid to speak their minds, who all have different perspectives on many different things, despite coming from all very impressive backgrounds. Everyone has a different view, and if you're trying to be an effective leader in this world, you need to understand each and every one of them and understand be able to empathize with them and then move forward.
And I think, the place you start putting together the boat, to keep our metaphor rolling here, is in New Orleans or
Yes.
in Vietnam or in Egypt and Israel, or when you go to New York in your first job, and you have the opportunity to put those things into practice.
Absolutely.
And I think being surrounded by those different folks who are each trying to do that, there's a lot of value there. And I think by making you make decisions and forcing you into discomfort and forcing some of those good dilemmas, et cetera, that's where there's a lot of value to grow and develop as a person.
Yeah. You learn by doing, not by reading out of a boat manual. You got to get out there and drive the boat or try to build the boat. And that's exactly what all these experiences give us is, hey, like, here are some reps. Go try this out. If you're wrong, figure out why you're wrong. And then, like, we're going to get better the next time around. And the more opportunities you have to do that, the better. And then the better number of times you get to get it right. And that's really what we see more as, coming from the program ourselves.
Yeah. The investment in us and the experiences that we had, this was not only somebody's financial commitment, and that was substantial, but it was his vision for trying to produce people who are going to, help be those agents of change that we talked about, who are going to be leaders in the world.
So I don't even know where to start with Mr. Robertson. It's truly changed my life, this gift and this opportunity that he's given each of us.